On a quiet afternoon in a small-town diner, Sarah never expected that a simple act of kindness would change her life forever. When she noticed a struggling Marine in distress, she stepped in without hesitation, saving him from a moment that could have ended tragically. What happened next was beyond anything she could have imagined. A grateful group of Marines, united by loyalty and respect, arrived at her doorstep to show their thanks in the most unforgettable way. The diner was a sanctuary of familiarity in the heart of the small town, its checkered floors and neon signs glowing softly against the late afternoon sun. Inside, the scent of frying bacon mingled with the sweet aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Sarah loved the steady rhythm of her job here. The casual greetings exchanged with regulars, the subtle nods between kitchen and floor, the comforting routine that gave her life a sense of purpose. It was more than a job. It was a place where stories unfolded every day, where lives intersected in the hum of shared moments. That particular afternoon felt different, though. The usual lunchtime bustle was tinged with an undercurrent of tension Sarah couldn't quite place. The bell above the door jingled incessantly as new customers trickled in, bringing their own noises and conversations. Sarah moved fluidly between tables, refilling coffees, taking orders, exchanging smiles. But when she glanced toward the corner booth, her heart caught in a way it hadn't before. There, sitting alone, was a young man dressed in a crisp Marine Corps uniform. He looked out of place, not just because of his attire in a civilian diner, but because of the way he seemed disconnected from the world around him. His eyes were fixed on a point somewhere beyond the window, glazed and unfocused, as though the noise and laughter were a distant echo. His hands clenched and unclenched on the table like he was wrestling with invisible demons. Sarah had seen tough days, hard faces, people carrying burdens they tried to hide, but there was something raw and vulnerable about this Marine. She felt an almost instinctive pull to check on him. Something told her that beneath the rigid uniform was a man quietly fighting a battle she couldn't see. She approached cautiously, careful not to startle him. "Hi there," she said gently, placing a menu in front of him. "Can I get you something to eat or drink?" The Marine blinked, his lips parting as if to respond, but then his face twisted sharply. His breathing hitched, shallow and rapid. Without warning, he slumped forward, knocking over his coffee. The dark liquid spread across the table and dripped onto the floor. The diner froze. Time seemed to stretch and warp as Sarah reacted instinctively, dropping to her knees beside him. Her hands moved swiftly, checking his pulse, cradling his head, urging him to breathe. "Stay with me," she whispered urgently. "Help is on the way." Other customers called out. Some dialed 911. The clatter of plates and conversation had vanished, replaced by the tense rhythm of waiting and watching. Sarah's voice was calm, steady, a lifeline in the sudden chaos. She rubbed the Marine's back gently, murmuring words of encouragement she hoped could break through the panic that was gripping him. Minutes later, the paramedics burst through the door, efficient and focused. Sarah stayed close as they lifted him onto a stretcher, never letting go of his hand until they whisked him away. The quiet that settled afterward was heavy, filled with the echoes of what had just happened. Sarah's thoughts swirled as she wiped down the table where the Marine had collapsed. She wondered about his story, what had brought him to this moment of crisis in a place so far from the front lines he had surely seen. Who was he when he wasn't in uniform? What battles did he face inside that no one else could see? Later that evening, Sarah couldn't shake the image of him from her mind, the vulnerability hidden beneath the military bearing. She made a silent promise to herself. If he came back, she would be ready to listen, to offer more than just food and shelter from the cold. Maybe she couldn't fix what haunted him, but she could be a steady presence, a small light in a world that often felt overwhelmingly dark. When James, the Marine's name, did return, Sarah greeted him not just as a customer, but as a friend. She brought him warm meals and gentle conversation, creating a quiet space where he could feel safe to share pieces of his story. Through her kindness, James began to open up about the invisible wounds he carried, the nightmares, the isolation, the struggle to find purpose after service. Sarah learned that sometimes saving a life isn't about heroic gestures, but about small acts of compassion, showing up, listening, and simply being there. And in that diner, on a quiet street corner, a bond was formed that would change both their lives forever. Would you like me to keep expanding or add more about their backgrounds or other characters? James returned to the diner several days after his hospitalization, walking through the familiar door with a hesitant step. Sarah noticed immediately the way his eyes darted around the room, searching for something steady amid the noise and chatter. He wasn't the confident Marine in full uniform anymore, but a man weighed down by invisible burdens. His uniform was pressed, but there was a subtle weariness in the way he carried himself, as if each step took more effort than the last. Sarah greeted him with a warm smile and a plate of steaming food, comfort in simple form. James sat down quietly at the corner booth, the one near the window where the sunlight pooled in golden patches. At first, he ate with little conversation, his movements slow and deliberate, as if trying to ground himself in the moment. But as the days passed, he began to share small pieces of his story, his voice low and sometimes trembling. He told Sarah about his time in the Marines, the camaraderie, the discipline, the pride of serving his country. But alongside those memories were darker shadows, the relentless stress of combat, the friends he lost, and the things he had seen that haunted him in the quiet hours of the night. PTSD wasn't just a word to him. It was a constant companion, lurking in the background of his mind, ready to overwhelm him when he least expected it. James explained how hard it had been to adjust to civilian life. The structure and brotherhood of the military were gone, replaced by a confusing world that seemed indifferent to his pain. Jobs were scarce, support systems patchy, and every day brought new challenges. He spoke of nights spent wandering city streets, trying to escape the ghosts of his past, and the crushing loneliness that came with feeling invisible. Sarah listened without judgment, her eyes reflecting a deep empathy. She understood that healing wasn't linear, and that trust was something earned slowly. Her simple acts of kindness, the meals she brought, the quiet moments shared over coffee, became lifelines for James. He began to lean on her presence, finding comfort in the fact that someone saw him, really saw him, beyond the uniform or the struggles. Their conversations grew longer and more open, weaving through topics both light and heavy. James shared dreams he had shelved long ago, plans for school, a family, a life reclaimed from the wreckage of war. Sarah encouraged him gently, reminding him that hope was still possible, even in the darkest times. In turn, Sarah found herself changed by their friendship. She realized how little she had known about the challenges veterans faced once they returned home, and how much more could be done to support them. Her heart ached for the countless others like James, invisible battles fought in silence. Together, they began to talk about ways to make a difference. James mentioned a local veterans group that met weekly but often struggled to reach those who needed help most. Sarah offered to help spread the word, to create a welcoming space where stories could be shared and healing could begin. As spring edged into summer, the diner became more than just a place to eat. It was a refuge. Veterans who heard about James's story began to stop by, drawn by the promise of understanding and kindness. Sarah's small act of saving one man had grown into a quiet movement of connection and support. Through it all, James started to rebuild himself, not as a Marine on the battlefield, but as a man reclaiming his life piece by piece, and Sarah stood beside him, a steadfast friend and witness to his courage. Their journey was far from over, but together they faced the future with a flicker of hope that refused to be extinguished. News of Sarah's kindness and the story of James's recovery spread quietly but steadily throughout the local veteran community and beyond. Veterans who had once felt invisible, forgotten by the world they had served, began to hear whispers of a diner where a young woman had stepped in when it mattered most. The bond that had formed between Sarah and James wasn't just a private healing, it was becoming a symbol of something larger, the power of compassion to bridge divides and heal wounds that ran deeper than flesh. One bright morning, as Sarah was setting tables before the lunch rush, the bell above the diner door chimed sharply. She looked up, her eyes catching a group of men entering with purposeful strides. They were dressed in full-dress blues, their uniforms immaculate, boots polished to a mirror shine, medals gleaming with the quiet pride of service. 12 Marines, James's brothers-in-arms, stepped inside, a living testament to loyalty and honor. Sarah's breath caught. She recognized the commanding presence of a sergeant at the front who carried himself with the ease of leadership earned through years of service. The Marines moved as one, their formation respectful but relaxed, their eyes scanning the room until they found her. The diner fell into an expectant hush. Regulars paused their meals, and a few wiped their eyes, sensing the gravity of the moment. The Marines approached Sarah's station, and the sergeant spoke with a voice steady but warm. "We wanted to come here ourselves to thank you. What you did, saving James, it meant more than words can say." Sarah felt a flush of surprise and gratitude, but also a deep humility. She shook her head gently. "I just did what anyone would do." The sergeant smiled, but his eyes held a seriousness that underscored the importance of her actions. "No, not everyone does. You saw him. You acted when it counted. For that, you're part of the family now." Over the next hour, the Marines shared stories, not just of battles fought overseas, but of the battles faced after service, the struggle to find a place in a world that moved on, the weight of memories that never faded, and the brotherhood that kept them together through it all. Sarah listened, fascinated and moved, as they spoke with candor and respect. They talked about James's journey too, the steps he had taken toward healing, the strength it took to ask for help, and the role Sarah's kindness had played. One of the younger Marines, a corporal with a quick smile and kind eyes, recounted how James had told them about the diner, about a woman who refused to turn away. "It gave us all hope," he said. "Hope that even when you're at your lowest, someone out there still cares." The visit wasn't just about gratitude, it was about connection. Sarah felt a profound sense of belonging, as if the threads of her life were weaving into something bigger than herself. The Marines invited her to events, to community gatherings, and to meet other veterans who could benefit from her compassion. James, standing quietly among them, seemed transformed. The weight that had once bowed his shoulders was lighter, replaced by a quiet pride. Together, they embodied a story of resilience and redemption that inspired everyone who heard it. That day marked a turning point. The Marines' visit brought more than thanks. It brought a renewed sense of purpose for Sarah and a bridge between civilian and military worlds. The diner, once just a backdrop to everyday life, became a symbol of hope and healing. Sarah realized that kindness was contagious and that one act could ripple outward, touching lives she had never imagined. The bonds formed in that small, sunlit diner were unbreakable, built on respect, gratitude, and the shared understanding of what it truly means to serve. And as the Marines left, marching with the same precision that had carried them through countless challenges, Sarah knew that this was only the beginning of a journey none of them would walk alone. The day the Marines arrived at Sarah's doorstep was unlike any she had ever experienced. It began quietly enough. The usual sounds of the neighborhood, the distant hum of cars passing by, children playing in the park down the street. Sarah was tending to her small garden, her hands deep in the soil as she clipped roses and watered herbs, when she heard the unmistakable sound of heavy boots on the pavement. At first, she thought it was a group of teenagers, but as she looked up, her heart skipped a beat. There, standing in formation, were 12 Marines, dressed in their full ceremonial uniforms. Their presence was striking. Sharp creases in their trousers, polished medals gleaming in the sunlight, caps held firmly in their hands. They looked like they had marched straight out of a parade, but they had come for a far more personal mission. Sarah felt a wave of emotions flood over her: surprise, gratitude, and an overwhelming sense of honor. They had come not just as strangers or visitors, but as a family united by respect and gratitude. The leader, a tall sergeant with a steady voice and kind eyes, stepped forward and introduced himself. He explained that they were James's unit, his brothers who wanted to personally thank her for the kindness and courage she had shown. For a moment, words failed Sarah. The idea that this group of disciplined, brave men had taken the time to come to her home was deeply moving. She invited them inside, where the air was filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the warmth of home-cooked food. The Marines removed their caps, revealing faces marked by experience and hardship, but also by pride and camaraderie. As they settled into Sarah's living room, stories began to flow. They spoke of James's journey, how he had struggled after returning from deployment, wrestling with memories that refused to fade. They recounted the long nights he had spent searching for hope, and how her intervention at the diner had been a lifeline in his darkest hour. Sarah listened intently as they shared these personal reflections, realizing how deeply interconnected their lives had become. These men, who had faced unimaginable challenges together, now extended that bond to include her, a civilian whose simple act of kindness had made a profound difference. The conversation shifted to the wider struggles veterans face: the difficulty of reintegrating into civilian life, the lack of support for mental health, and the importance of community. The Marines talked about the unspoken brotherhood that sustained them, and how Sarah's openness had offered a glimpse of light amid the shadows. At one point, the sergeant presented Sarah with a small token, a challenge coin engraved with the emblem of their unit. It was a symbol of respect and gratitude, a gesture that spoke volumes about the impact she had made. Sarah accepted it with tears in her eyes, touched beyond words. The visit lasted for hours, filled with laughter, solemn moments, and a shared understanding that transcended backgrounds. Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was more than just a thank you. It was a call to action, to continue supporting veterans, to build bridges where walls once stood, and to honor the sacrifices made by those who serve. When the Marines finally stood to leave, they did so with a sense of unity and promise. They pledged to return, to bring more of their brothers and sisters, and to work alongside Sarah in creating a community where no veteran felt forgotten. As the sound of their boots faded down the street, Sarah stood at her doorstep, holding the challenge coin tightly. She knew her life had changed irrevocably. What began as a single act of compassion had blossomed into a mission that would touch countless lives. The Marines had come to thank her, but in truth, she felt they had given her something priceless, a connection to a family she had never known she needed. From that day forward, Sarah was no longer just a waitress or a neighbor. She was part of something greater, a guardian of hope and a beacon for those seeking healing. The Marines' visit was a turning point, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can spark profound change, and that gratitude, when expressed with honor, can build lasting bonds stronger than any uniform. In the weeks that followed the Marines' visit to Sarah's home, something remarkable began to take shape, not just in her life, but in the lives of many others around her. The small gesture that had started with a single act of kindness in a diner was now blossoming into a community-wide movement of support and connection. Sarah found herself busier than ever, but in a way that filled her with purpose and joy. She and James worked closely together, reaching out to local veterans organizations, community leaders, and even schools to raise awareness about the challenges veterans faced after service. Their story, the story of a woman who saved a Marine's life and the brotherhood of Marines who showed their gratitude, became a powerful catalyst for change. The diner, once a quiet corner spot, transformed into a hub of hope. Veterans began stopping by not only for meals, but to share their stories, seek advice, and find solace in a place that welcomed them without judgment. Sarah arranged regular gatherings where veterans could connect, sometimes with guest speakers who specialized in mental health, job training, or housing assistance. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, a refuge from the isolation many had experienced. James, who had once struggled silently with his pain, emerged as a leader within this new community. His courage in sharing his journey inspired others to open up, to break the silence that so often surrounded trauma. Sarah watched with pride as he helped organize events, mentored younger veterans, and worked tirelessly to ensure no one felt alone. Their partnership extended beyond the diner. They collaborated with local charities to create care packages for homeless veterans, organized fundraisers to support counseling services, and advocated for policies that improved access to healthcare and housing. The ripple effect was tangible. More veterans were finding the resources and support they needed, and the community was rallying around them with renewed compassion. One particularly memorable day was when the group hosted a large outdoor picnic in the town park. Families, veterans, and community members gathered under blue skies, sharing food, music, and stories. The event was filled with laughter, tears, and moments of genuine connection. Sarah looked around at the crowd, people from all walks of life brought together by the simple, powerful act of kindness that had sparked it all. In quiet moments, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that day she first noticed James in the diner, struggling and alone. What had begun as a spontaneous act to help someone in immediate need had grown into a lifelong mission. It was a testament to the extraordinary impact one person's compassion could have, the way it could heal wounds, forge bonds, and inspire a community to stand together. James and Sarah's journey was far from over, but they faced the future with hope and determination. Together they had built something stronger than any uniform or rank, a family bound by respect, gratitude, and the unshakable belief that no one should face their battles alone. And as the sun set on another day, filled with purpose and connection, Sarah knew that the legacy of that moment in the diner, the moment when she chose to act, would continue to grow, touching lives in ways she had never imagined. In saving a Marine's life, she had helped save many more, and in doing so, found a calling that would carry her forward for years to come. When Marcus, a war-weary army veteran battling his own invisible wounds, stumbles upon the diner that changed James's life, he's skeptical. Years of hardship and silence have made him wary of kindness and wary of hope. But Sarah's warmth and the brotherhood forged there slowly begin to break through his guarded exterior. As Marcus joins the community of veterans Sarah and James have nurtured, he finds himself confronting his past in ways he never thought possible. Through late-night talks, shared struggles, and moments of unexpected laughter, Marcus begins to rediscover a purpose beyond pain. This spin-off tells a story of resilience, friendship, and the healing power of a place where broken souls find family. It explores the ripple effects of compassion, showing how one act of kindness can echo through countless lives, transforming despair into hope and strangers into lifelong allies.